Hey friends, my name is Derrick Broze, and you are listening to the Conscious Resistance Network, your home for news, interviews, content that focuses on waking people up, exploring solutions, and finding a way to live together and create a better world. I'd like to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com to get all of our latest content. Also follow us on Minds, Steemit, DTube, join our Discord channel, sign up for our text list, follow us on BitChute, and if you want to support, do so at Subscribestar and Patreon.com. And of course, you can get our email newsletter right here. All right, guys, so this is a continuation of my investigation and sort of keeping up with the latest 5G news. If you're new here, I recommend pausing this video. And if you're wondering, well, what's the evidence that 5G causes health consequences, or what's the privacy concerns, or what's the local power concerns, you got to go back to the very beginning. Go to our 5G playlist on our YouTube channel, and you can check out all the videos, or just search 5G on our website and dive in and enjoy yourself. But previously, we've covered content like this. We did this one. When was this? This was back in April. Wired magazine wakes up to 5G health dangers. Wired actually started talking about the potential of health effects of cell phones and 5G. So you can check that out. And then we also had the New Yorker. The New Yorker finally wakes up to 5G danger. This was in May. So in April was Wired, then New Yorker in May. And the New Yorker finally wakes up to 5G dangers. I broke down a story about the New Yorker examining health and privacy concerns around 5G. And I also looked at other related 5G news at that time. So despite all odds, and despite appearances on CNN and most of the cable, mainstream news, there are people who are questioning the potential for health consequences, privacy concerns, etc. of 5G in the mainstream world. You got at least one writer with the New Yorker, we got at least one writer with Wired magazine, and now we have at least one opinion contributor at Scientific American. And for those who don't know, Scientific American is supposed to be America's oldest scientific journal magazine. It's not a peer-reviewed journal or anything like that, but it's a magazine of scientific news and scientific debates and topics, and one of the oldest in the country, if not the world. So this one is titled, "We Have No Reason to Believe 5G is Safe. The technology is coming, but contrary to what some people say, there could be health risks." And you see here, this what some people say is actually a link to another opinion writer that was published on the Scientific American. And I give them credit for this. They at least are doing a balanced job. They let two different people publish contradicting views about 5G. This one's called "5G is Coming. How Worried Should We Be About the Health Risk?" So far, there's little evidence of danger from Kenneth Foster back in September. And who is Kenneth Foster? Let's get to know our writers before we get into what they are talking about. Kenneth Foster, PhD, Emeritus Professor of Bioengineering at the University of Pennsylvania, has been involved in studies of health and safety aspects of RF energy for many years. He's a member of the International Committee on Electromagnetic Safety, which has set exposure limits for RF energy. So he's a member of this group that sets exposure limits. Now think about that. If the current exposure limits are exposing people to harm, he might not be the first person to ring the alarm bells because his organization sets those limits. He is also a registered professional engineer and provides engineering consulting services to industry and government, chiefly on exposure assessment of RF fields. Some of his past or future clients may possibly install 5G equipment. So that's Kenneth Foster here, putting doubt in the minds of people whether there's a reason to question 5G. On this one that just was published October 17th, we have Joel Moskowitz, and he is PhD Director for the Center for Family and Community Health in the School of Public Health at the University of California, Berkeley. He has been translating and disseminating research on wireless radiation since 2009, after he and his colleague published a review paper that found long-term cell phone users were at greater risk of brain tumors. His electromagnetic radiation safety website has more than 2 million page views since 2013. He is an unpaid advisor to the International EMF Scientist Appeal and Physicians for Safe Technology. So two different PhDs here, coming from different sides. One worked for government and industry, worked for the International Committee on Electromagnetic Safety, and the other, who is coming from the other side, a scientist or researcher who has been working to expose the research and the dangers of wireless radiation since 2009, so 10 years now, and has published at least one paper that we see on the topic. So let's get into what he's bringing to the table. The telecommunications industry and their experts have accused many scientists who have researched the effects of cell phone radiation of fear-mongering over the advent of wireless technologies 5G. Since much of our research is publicly funded, we believe it is our ethical responsibility to inform the public about what peer-reviewed scientific literature tell us about the health risks from wireless radiation. The chairman of the FCC recently announced through a press release that the commission will soon reaffirm the radio frequency radiation exposure limits that they adopted in the 1990s. Remember, this is based on the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So, excuse me, the FCC is using limits that are decades old and do not take into account current smartphone technology or 5G at all. And they only take into account exposure to microwave radiation, and they look at the heating specifically. And so they say, oh, look, there's no effects, there's no ionization going on, there's no molecular DNA changes, so there's nothing, that there's nothing to see, basically. Yet, since the FCC adopted these limits based largely on research from the 1980s, the preponderance of peer-reviewed research, which he says is more than 500 studies, and there's a link to a Google Drive with these studies, have found harmful biologic or health effects from exposure to radio frequency radiation at intensities too low to cause significant heating. So again, the government only looks at the effects of heating, but the studies are showing that even if you're not being heated up by the cell phone, the laptop, or other device, it could still be affecting you in other ways. Citing this large body of research, more than 240 scientists have published peer-reviewed research on the biologic and health effects of non-ionizing electromagnetic fields and signed the International EMF Scientist Appeal, which calls for stronger exposure limits. And this is what it says. Quote, numerous recent scientific publications have shown that EMF affects living organisms at level well below most international and national guidelines. Effects include increased cancer risk, cellular stress, increase in harmful free radicals, genetic damages, structural and functional changes of the reproductive system, learning and memory deficits, neurological disorders, and negative impacts on general well-being in humans. Damage goes well beyond the human race, as there is growing evidence of harmful effects to both plant and animal life. The scientists who signed this appeal arguably constitute the majority of experts on the effects of non-ionizing radiation. They have published more than 2,000 papers and letters on EMFs in professional journals. The FCC's radio frequency radiation limits regulate the intensity of exposure, taking into account the frequency of the carrier waves, but ignores the signaling properties of the RFR. Along with the patterning and duration of exposure, certain characteristics of the signal increase the biologic and health impacts of the exposure. New exposure limits are needed, which account for differential effects. So he's pointing out all the flawed evidence or lack of evidence that has been put forth by government agencies and by the industry. And also, he mentions here the $30 million 10-year study by the National Toxicology Program, which I have covered extensively, found clear evidence that 2 years of exposure to cell phone radio frequency radiation increased cancer in male rats and damaged DNA in rats and mice of both sexes. The Ramazzini Institute in Italy replicated the key finding of the NTP using a different carrier frequency and much weaker exposure to cell phone radiation. So even at low levels of exposure, which is typically the complaint of some people, they say, oh, well, that study looked at high levels of exposure. That's not realistic. Well, it might be realistic when you're living in a 5G world where you're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of new cell towers and small cell sites. But even at this lower level of exposure to cell phone radiation, they still replicated the study and found an increase of cancer in male rats and damages of DNA in the rats and mice of both sexes. That's going to happen to you as a human being. Based on this research published since 2011, including human and animal studies, the radio frequency radiation has been set to be reviewed again in the next 5 years. Since many EMF scientists believe we now have sufficient evidence to consider radio frequency radiation as either a probable or known human carcinogen, it is very likely that they will upgrade the carcinogenic potential of radio frequency radiation in the near future. In the near future, we're going to find out, yes, that we're getting exposed to cancer-causing millimeter waves and other types of radio frequency radiation, but at that point, it might be too late. I'm not going to spend the whole video reading this article, but it's highly informative. If you've got people who are skeptical about the dangers of cell phones and 5G and EMFs in general, send them this article. Of course, it'll be in the link below. We have no reason to believe 5G is safe. And then I want to show this with you. This is another article I found at bohemian.com. which is, I think, North Bay, California kind of area. North Bay activists warn of serious health impacts associated with 5G devices. They call this sleeper cells. And again, this is worth exploring and reading. It talks about the local fight over there in California and what's going on. And then this is a little bit of good news. Indianapolis Business Journal, Carmel Council urges lawmakers, FCC, to limit 5G technology deployment. This is just in the last week. It says, well, in order to read it, it says I have to be able to pay, so I can't see it now, but I got another copy of this article I'll have to show you guys later. My point is, we have another state, another city actually starting to step up, their city council fighting back, pushing back, saying that the FCC needs to limit the deployment of 5G. And this is happening all over the country. Again, you won't see this on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, etc., any of the local papers, any of the major owned papers, because they're trying to keep you asleep. And the only thing that people are hearing about 5G from Sprint and Verizon is it's going to make their internet hundreds of times faster, faster downloads, etc. Especially the younger generation. They're being heavily propagandized to accept this. Continue to spread information. Please check out our 5G playlist if you haven't seen it. It talks about the health concerns, the privacy concerns. The New Yorker has talked about this. Wired Magazine has talked about this. Now Scientific American has talked about this, and I have been talking about this for some time. So please continue to spread the word before it's too late. This is one of the big reasons why I've been running for mayor, to bring this issue to the table. And thankfully, people are listening. I don't know if that means I'm going to win and be able to stop 5G, but that was one of my major goals. And either way, hopefully we have exposed the issue and expanded those who are questioning this new technology and not just going to blindly swallow it up like they would like us to do. This is where we're going to leave it, my friends. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, share, thumbs up, all that good stuff. It is very much appreciated. And until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. The technology of the future is here, and we're either going to expose the dangers associated with it, or we're going to die surrounded by it. Make your choice. Peace.